Now then, between now and 10, we are going to be exploring some rather weird and wonderful classical connections with a man who does deserve, I believe, the title of music maestro. Not only is he a conductor who travels all over the world to conduct very prestigious orchestras, he is a composer, he is an ace pianist, he's an educator, and he has just launched a digital TV series aiming to prove that it is possible to connect classical music to just about anything, from green plastic frogs to drain pipes, from peas to shaving cream. That is the Barber of Seville overture by Rossini, who is one of, and in fact the latest one, of a star-studded cast of great composers to be given the, I think we can call it, the Robert Emery treatment. Robert is a conductor, he is a pianist, he's a producer, he's an educator, and his latest venture, well, he is a man on a digital TV musical mission to prove that it is possible to connect classical music to pretty much anything. His new series is called Classical Connections. A new episode is launched, is aired every Friday, and Robert is with us this evening to give us a taste of his refreshingly unstuffy approach to classical music and composers. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening, Helen. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And having dipped into some of your offerings today, that adjective unstuffy is really the correct one, because you really are like a breath of fresh air sat there at the piano.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I love classical music. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful genre of music, and it doesn't need to be for the wealthy people who live in London, in Kensington, and they put on their dicky bows and go to the opera and pay 150 quid for a ticket. It can be for everyone, and Rossini, I mean, who you were just playing, the Barber of Seville, I mean, it's an amazing piece of music, but, I mean, did you know it was a massive failure when he premiered it? It went down like a lead balloon. It was terrible. Nobody liked it.
How on earth could that happen? You know, when you think now of its reputation within the canon, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, there was a composer who already had written an opera called Barber of Seville. He'd literally written the same opera, but with his own music. The composer was called Giovanni Paisiello, and the funny thing is, nobody knows his opera today, but we all know Rossini's. But unfortunately, back then, everybody knew Paisiello's opera. And so when Rossini bought his own version of the Barber of Seville, then nobody liked it because they liked the Paisiello version. It's just, you know, the Rossini one has stood the test of time. Paisiello sadly has not.
No, Paisiello didn't make it to posterity, did he? I don't think.
No. And, you know, Rossini was a clever guy. You know, he wrote almost 40 operas in about 12 years. And he became insanely rich and also insanely fat because he basically spent his money on food. And he just ate and ate and ate for the rest of his life. He never needed to work again. And he died a very, very large gentleman.
That's beautifully put. And this is rather, because you are illustrating beautifully here, and much more beautifully than if I were to ask you a question about it. Your approach to classical music and to these classical connections that you manage to make, because what you do is you unearth sort of probably hitherto less known facts, quirky facts, but facts that will appeal to a wide audience. And also somehow you start off with two seemingly completely disparate objects, and throughout the course of a 3 or 4 minute film with music, you manage to show how they are connected classically.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like all good ideas, it started down the pub. And I was with a friend, and I was trying to have a debate with him, saying that he should and does love classical music. And he disagreed with me. He said, no, it's not for me. I like good old rock music. And I said, no, I bet you love classical music. And classical music is around you. It's everywhere. All the rock music you listen to stems from classical music. And I'll prove it. I said, give me 2 random things that I need to connect with music, and I'll go away and I'll find a story that connects them. And he gave me orange juice and a costume of some sort, or clothing. And so I went away and did some research, and I found a composer called Berlioz. Now Berlioz was a hopeless romantic, really. He was utterly in love with this girl called Marie, and he went to Marie's mother and said, "Excuse me, Mrs. Moke, can I please marry your daughter?" And Mrs. Moke said, "You can marry my daughter only if you win the Prix de Rome, which is the competition, if you're a composer, to win. It's like the Holy Grail. It's like winning an Oscar." And it took him 4 attempts to win this, and he eventually managed to win it. And he went back and he found Marie and said, "Marie, will you please marry me?" And she turned around and said, "No, you're too late. I'm already married." And anyway, he got so angry with this. He got so angry, he decided that he would get on a bus from where he was living. He only had some orange juice with him, and that's all he had. He had no food, and he went on a very long bus journey to go. And his believe it or not, his modus operandi was to go to Marie's house, to dress up as a French maid, to enter her house in disguise for a job interview to be a maid, and then to get out a gun and shoot Marie, the new husband, the mother, and then finally himself. And this is all dead true. I mean, it sounds like an episode of EastEnders. You couldn't make it up. And anyway, he had to change buses or something. So the station was next to the seaside. He was looking out to sea. And because he hadn't eaten properly and he only had this orange juice, he fainted. And he fell into the sea. I kid you not. And it's just lucky that there was a fishing boat nearby, and they rowed over to him, hauled him in to the boat, and he came to, and he kind of looked around and he said, "What am I doing? I'm dressed up as a French maid. I've got a gun. I'm about to shoot this woman and end my life. Let's forget it and let's go back to composing." And he went back to his home, and that was the end of that. I mean, these stories, they are incredible.
Oh, but as well, I mean, to me, then you would listen to his music again, and you'd listen to it differently. Because you'd have that in the back of your mind. Whether you could take it entirely seriously, I'm not sure. But certainly these sort of winkling out of these anecdotes, it does change the way that you think about somebody who you might think was incredibly serious because he was composing this rather marvelous music. Yeah,
totally. And my mate down the pub, I mean, I told him the story. He couldn't believe it until I actually showed him the book I found this amazing story in. And I just said to him, look, classical music is all around us. If you love pop music and if you love rock music, you're going to love classical music. Even a hit like All By Myself, which of course was made uber famous by the wonderful Celine Dion. Well, actually, if you look on the writing credit, believe it or not, of All By Myself, it's written by Eric Carmen / Sergei Rachmaninoff. And that's because they literally used the Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2. They lifted it and put it into this beautiful piece which Celine Dion made world famous. And that's not the only example. I mean, there's a piece of Take That, and they used, what's it called now? I've forgotten, to be honest with you. It will come back to me. But they used it, the Chopin Prelude in C minor. And there's so many examples of these amazing pop tunes that have been bought with classical music and have been created through classical music. So it's around us. It's everywhere, whether you like it or not.
Well, we're likely to like it after you've finished with us, I would venture to suggest. And this idea of connecting disparate objects, we heard the Rossini a little bit earlier, and with Rossini, he's the peas and the shaving cream guy.
Yes, Rossini is the peas and the shaving cream. That's because he loved the food. He wrote a piece about food that he loved. He even wrote one called Oeuf le petit pois. And of course, there is the famous dish that was created after him, the tornados alla Rossini, which is made up of filet mignon with toast, foie gras, And truffles, I mean, I'm not sure we'd have it for our breakfast, but it's a very famous dish, and he loved it, and he ate it almost every day of his life.
Now, when it comes to creating a TV series featuring great composers, how do you then go about deciding who to feature, and presumably you're not just sort of guided by the idea of who's got the weirdest connections. I imagine there's a little bit more to it than that when you are thinking, well, who do I choose? Who's going to make it into my list of 14?
Well, to be honest with you, I started by just asking friends and family to give me random items, and then I put them together, and I just did a load of research. I mean,
Right.
Liszt is a prime example. My wife said, okay, well, what about cigars or cigarettes or smoking or something like that, and some sort of animal? And I went away and found that Liszt was like the superstar of his day. Franz Liszt was the equivalent of Justin Bieber. He was everywhere. They even created this word called Listomania that everybody used. And he became so famous and he used to smoke cigars, and he had women following him around. And when he dropped the cigar on the floor, these women used to pick up these cigar butts and put them in lockets around their neck so they could have Liszt, sort of his waft of smell floating around them. Well, I mean, it's pretty disgusting if you think about it.
It's worse than throwing your underwear at Tom Jones, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And he, as I said, he became so famous that people wanted locks of his hair. And he got fed up with all these requests. He used to have this beautiful long hair, white hair. And he got fed up with the requests, so he bought a dog. And he just used to shave this dog and send the hair off as his own. And there you go. There's the link between cigars and an animal, a dog. And then it was clear, well, that's a Franz Liszt story. Okay, so let's throw in Franz Liszt into the Classical Connection series. And it spun like that until we got 14 episodes.
And they're wonderful. They're not long, but they're not. I don't feel like you're just skimming the surface either. They're the sort of programs that make you want to go away and listen to more.
Good. I'm glad you said that, because that's the whole point. I mean, it really is a dip your toe in. It's designed to give people an opportunity to experience classical music, because I get it. Classical music it's a brand which is old-fashioned. By its very nature, it's historical and dated, and it can be very, very complicated. If you listen to a Mahler symphony, which is an hour and a half, it's not as easy as putting on a track of Taylor Swift, which lasts 3 minutes 40 seconds. Mm-hmm. So, I get it. It's difficult to get into this genre. It makes total sense that its popularity is dying dramatically as time goes by. But that's why I think we need something like this show, where people can watch them primarily for entertainment value and to listen to these incredible stories from these incredible people. And it's got a little bit of music in. It's got enough that you can enjoy, me sitting at a beautiful old Steinway piano, and it's got enough that you can enjoy. And hopefully you'll watch it and you'll go, okay, I like this. I think I would like to listen to some more Rossini or Beethoven or Bruckner or whatever it may be. And that's the whole reason for doing it, just to try and encourage people to dip their toe into the world of classical music.
And why does that matter to you so much, Robert, that people should?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, do you know what? I've loved classical music ever since I was a tot. And it's one of these things that, I've got a son. I've got a 5-year-old called Teddy. And he loves classical music too. And he doesn't love it because he's this uber-intelligent person who is like a mini Mozart. Not in the slightest. He loves it just because we've played it on the radio to him since the day one of his life. And And, I was driving him to school this morning, and one of the things he asked me to put on this morning was the playlist of John Williams, the film composer. Now you can turn around and say, well, why is he mentioning John Williams? We're talking about classical music. Well, in my humble opinion, fast forward 100 years, and John Williams will be put in the same paragraph as Beethoven, as Mozart, as Verdi. I think it's that important. And he writes some incredible orchestral music. And the thing is, for little Teddy, who is 5, because we've not put this pretentious element to it, he just enjoys the music. He just likes the tunes. He likes the colors of the orchestra. He loves Peter and the Wolf and the storytelling and all the funny instruments and the oboe that makes the duck noise. He loves all of these things because we've not tried to pretend it's anything fussy and complicated. And I think that's the trick. And that's why it's important to me, because without this foundation of classical music, you don't have that Celine Dion hit, and you don't have that Take That, Could It Be Magic hit. There you go, I remember the name now.
You've remembered, yes, well done.
There we go, it came to me. You don't have all of those hits. And so it's got to start somewhere, and that's really where it started. So without the foundation of classical music, you don't have popular music. You don't have Meatloaf, you don't have anybody.
And in some cases, it's got to start with a plastic frog and a drain pipe as well.
Like Grieg. Yes, indeed. Yeah, Grieg was a character. He hated going to school, and he used to have this really long walk to school. So he purposely walked underneath the gutters, especially if it was raining, and he would get soaked and drenched. So much so that by the time he arrived at school, he was soaking wet, and he would get sent home again to get changed. So he would walk an hour back home, get changed, and then walk an hour back to school, and before you knew it, half the day had gone. And so that's how we link Grieg with a drain pipe. And then he loved frogs. He just adored them, and they were his lucky charm, and he kept a green plastic frog in his pocket at all times. And he said, life wouldn't be the same without my green plastic frog. And there you have Grieg.
Well, and here you have Grieg. This is Edvard Grieg's Piano Concerto in A minor. That's the first part of the first movement of Edvard Grieg's Piano Concerto in A minor. Grieg, one of the featured composers in Robert Emery's new classical music TV series, Classical Connections. Grieg of The Plastic Frog. That I shall ever think of him like that now, Robert, thanks to you.
It's a really important piece, Helen, actually. Did you know it was the first ever piano concerto to be recorded in 1909? They didn't have the technology before that, so it's got a couple of claims to fame. That was one of them, and the second one is that there was a pianist called Simon Barreret who played this amazing piano concerto at the world famous Carnegie Hall in New York. And in 1951, he sat down at the piano. He played the brilliant opening chords at the top of the piano, and he started working his way down towards the bottom of the piano. And as he got to the bottom of that piano, of that opening introduction, bless him, he fell ill, and essentially he had a heart attack on stage and died. One shouldn't laugh at these things, but I think it's probably one of the first recorded histories of somebody dying whilst playing a piano concerto. And there we go. Yes, it's an important piece.
Who would have thought Grieg could be quite so dangerous?
Yeah, very dangerous.
If not lethal.
I know, but it's wonderful music.
Oh, it's beautiful. Well, and as a pianist yourself, clearly a piece that you love to play, if the film that you made is anything to go by, certainly something that you attacked with gusto and relish. And just watching that, I am sort of maybe picking up that the piano is rather an important instrument in your life, and possibly is that where the seeds of this whole musical journey of yours began?
Yeah, totally. It began, and here's the other ironic thing for you, it began with Top of the Pops. It was back in, I know I'm showing my age a bit now, it was back in the day where we used to watch Top of the Pops as a family. I can't remember whether it was a Friday night or a Saturday. I think it was a Friday night.
Thursday.
At 7:30.
Oh,
right. Thursday, was it?
Yes, yeah, Top of the Pops, Thursday nights, definitely.
Oh, there you are then. Thursday night, 7:30. We used to watch it. And we used to have a piano in our house, which was my mum's piano. And before that, it was my mum's piano. So it was the sort of a family heirloom that was passed down. Awful old thing, bless it. But we used to watch this Top of the Pops, and if I liked a piece of music I heard on the Top of the Pops, I would just go to the piano, I'd sit there, and I'd play it. Now, I never had any training, I didn't have any lessons at that point, but I'd just sit there and figure it out and be able to play it. And I think at some point my mum went, okay, that's a bit strange, maybe we should get him some lessons. And I went down the road to have lessons, and very quickly, I grew up in Birmingham or near to Birmingham. So very quickly, my mother put me in touch with the Conservatoire in Birmingham, and they were just launching a junior school at that point. And I think about the age of 10-ish, I was thrown into this Conservatoire. And as they say, the rest is history. I got a place at the Royal College of Music as a pianist, and I always wanted to be a piano player until I realised how hard work it was, how unlikely it was that I'd be able to make a decent living. And I thought it was much easier to wave a stick around. So I turned my hobby of conducting into my job of conducting. And now my hobby is playing the piano. So I don't get to do it very often, sadly, because of life. But yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? It's a bit like, somebody who is potentially a pretty decent footballer, who maybe gets taken on, and then they realise at a certain point, I'm not actually quite going to make it, and then they maybe turn to management.
That's exactly it. It's a brilliant analogy. But I love conducting as well, and sometimes I play the piano and conduct from the piano at the same time. And that I really enjoy. And I do that with the Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue. There's lots of clips on YouTube of various performances of me playing the Rhapsody in Blue. at the piano and conducting an orchestra at the same time, and that's enormous fun.
how on earth do you manage that? I cannot imagine how you could sort of compartmentalise, but not only your mind, but your memory, your hands, and to be able to play that and conduct at the same time. I'm waving my arms around here, wondering how you manage it.
I don't know. I never really thought about it, to be honest with you. It's just that piece is just so ingrained with me. I've heard that piece since I was, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old. So it's just, I know every bar of it backwards. So it's for me to play it and conduct it. It's not difficult in the slightest. So it's part of my being. It's really difficult to describe, but it's there with me.
Now, I'm fascinated by the discipline of conducting. It's really interesting talking to somebody who is an excellent instrumentalist, but to talk to somebody who actually has to stand there and create that togetherness, that tone, that quality, that to deliver the interpretation as well as the technical accuracy. I mean, that to me is it's so interesting. How on earth you actually think of the score? I'm just thinking of the scores, all those different parts. How you must need to be on top of all of it.
Yeah, you do. You do, and one of the things that helps me enormously is orchestrating. So I like producing albums as well as conducting, and as part of producing an album, I tend to write the music for the album of the person who I'm producing for, and that means I've got to write all these amazing orchestral parts out. And in doing so, I'm writing all of those bits of music for the oboe and the bassoon and the clarinet and the flute and the violin, viola, cello, double bass, and the, I don't know, whatever it might be, even saxophone occasionally, and the French horn, and trumpet, tuba, trombone, and it goes on and on and on. And I'm writing all of these bits of music for these people and their instruments. And therefore you get to know what the instruments are capable of, and you get to know why they're there and what role they play within the orchestra. And you can then apply that if you're conducting a bit of Gershwin, or if you're conducting a bit of Beethoven, or whatever it might be. You can apply the same logic to those scores, and it helps you understand. Music is like a great big jigsaw, except it's one of these things. It's one of these 20,000 piece jigsaws that you never ever quite finish. But the more you experience it, the more things just slot into place, and the more it makes sense. And it just goes on like that forever and ever. And that's what being a conductor is about. It's just about loving the music, showing your interpretation to the orchestra, and then letting them get on and make the noise and the music, and try and stay out of the way as much as you can.
But you say the orchestra, but it's not like you're sort of closely associated with one particular orchestra. It's not like say Simon Rattle and Birmingham or whatever. You sort of, well, I'm reading between the lines. You turn up and you conduct different orchestras all over the world, from London to Liverpool to Perth in Australia to Vienna to Basel so you must have to be pretty adaptable, I would guess, because every orchestra will be different. Okay, they're all made up of the same instruments, but no orchestra is going to be the same as another.
No, you're right. And their approach to rehearsals is also very, very different. When I go to places like Tokyo, then our rehearsals over there, they're strange. They do 80-minute rehearsals, and then they pause for 20 minutes, and then they do another 80-minute rehearsal, and then they pause for 20 minutes. And it goes on like that for, 6 or 7 hours in total. Whereas you go to Vienna, and you've got a 3-hour, 15-minute rehearsal, and they're allowed to do one a day, and that is it. You shall not do any more. We come to London, and we've got different rules here as well. So you're right. Each place you go to has a different way of working, a different set of rules. But fundamentally, we're all there to enjoy making music, and some orchestras are better than others. Some nationalities learn quicker, shall we say, than others. You can put new music in front of a London player, and bam, they'll get it straight away. If you go to Korea, with utter respect to them, it will take them a bit longer just because they're probably not quite as experienced as the London players. So it's an interesting life that I lead. That's for sure.
Well, absolutely, and having to make a pretty immediate impression on an orchestra that maybe you haven't worked with before, from your point of view, but also them to gauge what it is that you're trying to winkle out of them as well. I mean, it's a complicated dynamic.
Yeah, and do you know what? I've always had an issue in my life so far. It's a strange issue, and it will stop one day. But it's the issue of being too young. There are not many jobs where you can turn around and say you're too young to do this. But when you've got players who are 45, 55, 65 years old, and I started conducting when I was I started conducting when I was 16, but professionally, I guess I started conducting when I was about 21. Now, imagine a 21-year-old going and standing in front of players who have been there, more than double your entire life. And you as a conductor, you have to pretend that you are all-knowing and that you have the right interpretation and that you respectfully command to that 55-year-old that he follows your beat and your stick. It's difficult. And I've always had a bit of a thing about that, where I've always had orchestras who kind of look at me a little bit as if to say, oh, here we go, here's some sort of amateur coming. And it takes a while to win an orchestra over until they turn around and go, oh, yeah, well, this guy, I think he knows what he's doing. He's okay. Let's buckle up a bit and pay attention. And it does work like that. I have to work really hard to get that orchestra on my side. But once I'm there, then they'll play like nothing you've ever heard in your life for me. So it's a thrilling thing to experience.
I bet. And I mean, taking you back to when you first started out, when you decided that was going to be the musical path that you wanted to tread, your first few times, how on earth do you establish yourself as a conductor as well? Because there's one thing being a performer and wowing people that way, but they have to trust you to a certain degree to allow you to stand up there in the first place, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I kind of cheated a bit, if I'm being honest, Helen. When I got the place at the Royal College of Music, and I don't come from a wealthy family or anything, and my mum and dad said, hey, that's brilliant, you got to move down to London. Well done, congratulations. Now go and find a way to earn some money so you can pay for yourself. And I thought, well, I don't want to go and work in a bar. I definitely don't want to go and work in McDonald's or something like that. I would like to make money out of the thing that I feel like I'm here on this earth to do, which is to make music. And so I decided to be a little producer, and I hired a big town hall, and then I hired the Birmingham Philharmonic Orchestra, and I thought, I'm going to produce an event where I'm going to go and conduct the orchestra, and I'm going to produce the event. So I'm going to kind of pay myself a fee to conduct, and then I'm going to take in all the profit from the ticket money. And I did this just before I moved down to London at the age of, I think I would just about still be 17 by then. And I earned enough to get me through my first year at college. And it was simply a case of a young, cocky 17-year-old kid going, all I've got to do is wave a stick. And hopefully if I do it right, the orchestra will follow me. And if I do it terribly, hopefully they'll think I'm adorable because I'm a little kid who's still trying to do it. And hopefully it's a win-win situation. And that was the aim of the game, and it worked. And then I thought, well, I quite like this business. And that was it. I was off to the races, and you couldn't stop me from there onwards.
Oh my goodness, I don't know, jaw-dropping entrepreneurialism, jaw-dropping bravado, not to say cockiness, of course, as well.
Totally.
I mean, when you see a conductor standing there, and like you said, just waving the stick about, of course there is so much more to it than that. How much does a conductor make or break a performance, even with the top orchestras?
Oh, that's a loaded question if I ever heard one.
Sorry, it wasn't meant to be. I'm just really interested.
Well, no, it's a really good question. And the honest answer is it can be catastrophic if the conductor goes wrong, or it can have absolutely no effect. And it depends upon what the piece of music is, and it depends upon what the orchestra is. So, for instance, I've had a concert before now where we went on, I remember it vividly, went on to the opening of Act 2, the second half of the concert, and I think we were doing, it was with Russell Watson, and we were doing some sort of phantom medley thing to start with. And I remember walking on the stage, and I started conducting. I wasn't looking down, and then I looked down, and none of my music was there. Now, normally, a stagehand brings your music on and puts your music on this stand for you and lays it out, and it wasn't there. I thought, what should I do? So at that point, I kind of just shouted or whispered to the orchestra. I just said, "Carry on without me." And I kind of calmly walked off, and they carried on. And I walked back on with the music to a round of applause from the audience, of course. And then the orchestra got the biggest round of applause of the night. So they carried on absolutely beautifully on that scenario because it was a piece of music they knew really well. And they could just kind of clock in and just carry on without me. But if it was a piece of complicated music, which maybe they didn't know so well and rhythmically difficult, if I then made an error, the whole thing would very, very quickly fall apart. And on occasion, it has done. And it's just one of those things where, hey, it's a live performance, things are going to go wrong, and that's part of the fun.
Well, yes, and I'm sure that your flamboyance generally helps you to carry it off as well, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, you need to be a little bit confident to do this job, that's for sure. And I remember when I was doing another concert at the Royal Festival Hall in London, and I was sitting, again, it was the interval, I was sitting in my dressing room, and it was a Christmas concert we were doing, and I just heard over the tannoy in my dressing room, this beautiful angelic voice started singing, "We're Walking in the Air." I thought, that's strange, that's the first piece of the second half. So I better go and check what's going on. So I walked down calmly, looked at the side of the stage, and they'd started the concert without me. I couldn't believe it. The orchestra looked like they were, about to be hit by a car. They got these big, big eyes, like, what on earth do we do here? And my agent was in the audience, and I never forget it. I calmly walked on stage, and I reckon I got to the podium just about in time to give myself a downbeat just to start conducting, and the orchestra came in beautifully, and my agent at the end said, "Oh, Robert darling, oh, that was beautiful, beautiful drama, beautiful timing. You walked on and you gave that little boy just the time and the space to perform Walking in the Air, and you walked on so calmly. Oh, it was beautifully orchestrated, well done, beautifully choreographed." And I thought, well, if only you knew. And I was having a cup of tea in my dressing room, and I nearly missed it. And hey, that's what live performance is about. It's about the danger and having fun.
Well, you having fun is, well, I'm putting words in your mouth here, but it seems to me your motto. But having fun with the most beautiful, gorgeous, high quality music as well. And what for you, Robert, here you are, you're at a pretty high point in your career. Clearly the last year or so you haven't been able to operate in quite the same way you normally would in terms of touring the world, but you've got your conducting, your playing, your producing, your composing, and now of course your TV series. I mean, just to think that classical music has opened all those avenues up for you. Amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? And I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for the fact that I can share my love of music with everybody. I've created this website called Ted's List, which is named after my son, just to try and help anybody who needs any advice for music education, learning a musical instrument. They can go on to tedslist.com and they can read all about the musical instruments. And for me, music is about sharing your love of music with other people, and that's how it works best, and that's my modus operandi. That's how I choose to work, and I just hope everybody loves the Classical Connection series. I really do.
Well, I'm sure they will. All they need to do is to go onto YouTube and look for Classical Connections. I do believe that Satie is next in line for the Robert Emery treatment. But I'm just going to end with, I can't not end with a snatch at least of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue now, because I'm just going to have that vision in my head of you playing and conducting at the same time.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, but Robert, I could talk to you for another hour because you're absolutely fascinating and your passion is so infectious. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. It's been an absolute joy.
That's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. I much appreciate it. Thanks, Helen.